Welcome to Face2Face. This is a show about change and about what's next. It's a show that wants to ask questions, peel back the layers of our average everyday experience, and go beyond scratching the surface. We interview amazing people with incredible ideas and stories who have done wild, weird, and wonderful things. Remember that imagination shared creates collaboration, and collaboration creates community, and community inspires social change. I'm David Peck, and this is Face2Face.
What a pleasure it was to be able to interview Heather Young for her new film, Murmur, which I believe was world premiering at the Toronto International Film Festival. And she was one of, in fact, I think it was the first interview I did this year with Heather. So Heather, thanks for that, and a little shout out to you for a wonderful conversation about a brilliant new film. And apparently a few others agreed, because she went on to win the Fapresky, and I hope I said that right, but the prize of the International Federation of Film Critics for her new film, Murmur. Quote, here we go, a wonderful surprise and a true honor, says Heather about the award. So you are going to want to see this, and there is going to be a theatrical release, and it's coming up. And this is a really, I hope, Heather, you're okay with this, but I'm going to call this an unassuming film. This film could play as a theatrical piece, and I don't mean as a film, I mean on the stage in a way that I think many films can't. There's an intimacy, there's a beauty to this film that is, it's touching and it's warm and it's compassionate, and I think, it's one of those, as Roger Ebert might say, it's one of those empathetic making machines. That was his quote about movies, and I think Heather has done that with this film. It's about leading a life of quiet desperation. It's about stories in gray zones and about loneliness and isolation. It's about empathy and solitude, and living our lives in solitude, and how we all long for a relationship of one kind or another. And I'm not going to tell you much about this film, but you really do want to see this. This is from an exciting Canadian new director, Heather Young, and we had just this wonderful chat about so many things, the cycles of behavior that we find ourselves all sort of caught in, lack of self-awareness and sort of, the circular nature of our loneliness and despair. And I think there's this really beautiful theme, universal theme to Murmur and to Heather's film here, and that is one of love and connection, and how we all desire that, and how we all long for this relationship and relationships, I suppose, to be loved without judgment, guilt, and shame. And so, really lean in for the conversation. I know you're going to enjoy that, and look for the film. If it's not in the theater now, it will be soon, and then available on video on demand, I'm sure. And don't forget, davidpecklive.com for more information about my writing and my public speaking. You can head there. You can purchase a copy of my book, Real Change is Incremental. And then face2facelive.ca. We're gonna break 500 published interviews in 2020 sometime. If you want to come alongside and help us out financially, you can do that. I've set up a Patreon page. $1, $5, $10 a month would be fantastic, would be really welcome over here. Little things make a big difference. It all adds up to help offset costs. If you can't do that, and I totally understand it, please do leave us a review on iTunes. Would really appreciate that. Little digital noise goes a long way. Sign up for our newsletter, share the podcast with others, tweet about it, put us up on Facebook. And you can also advertise with us here at Face2Face as well, banner ads, and in the newsletter. You can be online. You can also be a part of the actual podcasts themselves. So reach out to us if you'd like to advertise here. We've got a pretty big demographic now, pretty wide, listened to in over 20 countries. It's kind of exciting how things continue to grow. And don't forget rabble.ca as well for a whole host of other writers and thinkers and bloggers and podcasters. News for the rest of us. It's a platform where Face2Face exists, but it's also an opportunity for you to dig deeper into issues that matter for Canadians and frankly for the globe. So look them up, rabble.ca, and stay tuned. Heather Young coming up talking about her new film, Murmur. Well, welcome to Face2Face. We're joined by a very special guest here with us today. We have Heather Young here with us to talk about her new film, Murmur.
Murmur's coming world premiere at the Toronto International Film Festival. Kind of exciting for everybody involved, I would think. Heather, thanks so much for joining us today on Face to Face.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So, hey, let's get the shameless shout out right out of the way, right out of the gate. houseplantfilms.ca. We'll talk about it more, I'm sure, and we'll have a link on your bio on the website. But that's houseplantfilms.ca to find out more about Heather and what she's up to, and whatever you can't find out there. Maybe Heather, you can talk to us about right now. Tell us a little bit about who you are and provide a little bit of context around. I don't know, your life as a filmmaker and a storyteller before we step into Murmur. How does that sound?
Sure, yeah, that's fine. I grew up in St. John, New Brunswick. New Brunswick I think of as kind of one of the forgotten provinces of Canada. But
oh, that's pretty funny.
And I went to the University of New Brunswick in Fredericton, and that's when I kind of started taking film studies classes and started to get, I guess, more interested in filmmaking. But when I was kind of, living in New Brunswick, being a filmmaker didn't really seem like a possibility or like something that people actually did, I suppose, because I didn't really know anyone who was a filmmaker. But through taking some kind of film studies classes at UNB, I got pretty into it and decided to try to pursue it further, and decided to apply to NSCAD University to their film production program in Halifax, and that's how I ended up moving to Halifax, which is where I live now in Nova Scotia. So I did a degree in film production at NSCAD, and graduated in 2009, and since then I've been making short films. I made a bunch of short films over the years, and then decided that I wanted to try doing a feature, and applied to the Telefilm Talent to Watch program, which used to be called the micro-budget program, but is now called Talent to Watch. And that was the program that I ended up making Murmur through. So
nice. So you were actually able to make Murmur with someone else's money. That's fantastic news.
Yes, I was. Yes, I'm very grateful to Telefilm for their support. So yeah,
well, that's amazing. I remember interviewing I'm drawing a blank on the name right now, 3-4 years ago at TIFF, and a foreign filmmaker, and we were kind of talking about the challenges that especially young filmmakers face. And she said, one of the first rules of filmmaking is you don't spend your own money, which I thought was that's kind of in a perfect world, but I would imagine that happens more often than not, it seems to me. So this has got to be pretty exciting for you. This is your first full-length feature, world premiere at TIFF. I think I'm pretty much sure I've read. I've heard you referred to as a bold new Canadian voice in filmmaking. I can hear you. You're laughing at that, but I'm kind of thinking it's true. Tell me a bit. Oh, and by the way, before we dive in, congratulations on the film. I absolutely loved it. I really did.
Oh, thanks very much.
Thank you. It's beautiful. It's tragic. It's just so understated as well, and yet very distinctive too in the way you approach it. And Donna. The woman who plays her, is it Shan? Is that her name?
Sean? Yes, Shan McDonald.
McDonald. I mean,
Shan McDonald. Yeah.
The performance you got out of her is just absolutely brilliant.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I'll tell her that. I'll tell her you said that.
Good.
She'll love to hear that.
Well, please do. And I this is one of those films that honestly I hope everyone gets to see. So yeah, tell me about your bold Canadian voice.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's a nice thing to hear. That that people have said that about my work. It's very encouraging and nice to hear. But really, I think it comes down to more that there's something exciting kind of happening in Canadian filmmaking, generally speaking, right now. I think there's so much exciting and strong work coming from Canadian filmmakers. Even right here in Nova Scotia, we have, there's so many Nova Scotian filmmakers that are inspiring me and inspiring my work, like Winston DeJoby and Ashley McKenzie and Corey Bowles. And so, we have a pretty small but vibrant, filmmaking community here in Nova Scotia. And, just seeing all the Canadian work that's coming out this year at TIFF and the other Canadian fall festivals has been really exciting. There's so many features and shorts that I want to see this year by Canadian filmmakers. And, we're really, I think there's kind of a trend, kind of, for lack of a better term, like a Canadian new wave or something that's sort of happening with, young people with strong voices and strong artistic visions, really coming to the forefront and really being, I think, recognized by these kind of bigger institutions like TIFF and Telefilm. And so, it's just really exciting to be part of that and to have Murmur, included in a showcase like TIFF is great. It's really exciting to be part of this exciting time for Canadian cinema, I feel like. So yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about, and I think you're absolutely right, by the way, and I think I've already started to get that sense just as I've been talking to a few people we're a couple days away from the fefestival hitting the ground running, I guess, in about 48 hours or something along those lines. The madness begins.
It's sneaking up very quickly.
It really is. I don't know how comfortable you are chatting about the actual film. I mean, I don't think too many people are gonna be listening to the podcast before the film is out.
Oh, no, that's fine. Yeah.
There's a maturity to this that I find really intriguing, and I mean, I couldn't help but think of, most, and I'm going to paraphrase Henry David Thoreau's quote here, but most of us live lives of quiet desperation,
That's nice, yeah.
And I kind of got that sense from Donna. Not only did I smile at her as somebody just trying to get by, in the way that she did things, there was a real normalcy to her life, and yet she seemed to be suffering from some real deep, dark things in her past that we don't ever really get much information about, which I also find fascinating from a storytelling perspective. So yeah, hopefully I've given you enough to sort of dive into there, but can you talk to us a little bit about that approach to the way you made this film? Because that mature level of storytelling. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. I like that kind of quote that you mentioned, quiet desperation. That's definitely something that interests me. In terms of character, I'm generally drawn to telling the stories of characters that are, somehow isolated and lonely, and therefore end up, in a kind of quiet desperation, in the sense that, they're looking for a connection and looking for someone to care for. And that's certainly the case, with the character of Donna. I wanted to kind of tell a story that was kind of in a gray zone in terms of Donna's kind of troubles, and we don't get a lot of information necessarily about the details of her troubles and her struggle, but for instance, with her drinking problem, I didn't want it to be something that you might typically see in a film about, let's say, an alcoholic, you know, someone who's kind of stumbling around drunk, or, you know, drinking hard liquor every day, or, you know, more of the kind of stereotype
Right.
of that type of a character. I kind of wanted to explore a character that has these types of struggles, but it's more subtle. And I find these kind of subtle, kind of everyday struggles that are generally overlooked to be more interesting to me than something that's, you know, very overt and in your face. So, for instance, with Donna's, you know, alcohol trouble, it's you know, it's more that, you know, she drinks too much, but she's still like functioning like a normal person for the most part. She just kind of uses, you know, alcohol to try to feel differently and to try to, you know, help her mood and provide her with some pleasure. But it's more kind of pernicious, I suppose. It's more of like a subtle influence, like a subtle negative influence in her life. So I kind of use that approach with the film, trying to use subtlety in terms of the storytelling, and by leaving, you know, parts of the story unexplained. For instance, you know, her relationship with her daughter and how they became estranged and things like that. I feel it's interesting to do that because the audience can kind of become more engaged in that way, and really, you know, try to put it together for themselves, or wonder, you know, could it be this or could it be that, or but I find, you know, by hinting at these types of issues in the character's life, it can kind of engage the mind, you know, to work a little bit harder while watching the film potentially, and it can kind of be fun to engage in a story in that way, to try to kind of fill in the blanks yourself and kind of be a participant in how the story comes together in your mind, you know.
Absolutely. I mean, would you say that's a conscious choice to sort of try to create empathy with the viewer and the story that they're seeing unfold in front of them because of that desire almost to step in? I mean, I found myself wanting to know more when the film ended. On one hand, I was satisfied with the ending. On another hand, I wasn't, because, you know, wow, but isn't that what life is really like? We're all very complicated. We're all very paradoxical, and we've got these nuances. I mean, the people we meet on the street who we make these judgment calls on, or we meet at maybe dinner parties or whatever, we have no idea, right, their background and their context. And I just found myself sort of reflecting on that, because she seems so sort of measured in her own way, and yet here she is suffering from, you know, a criminal DUI conviction, doing community service, like really estranged from her daughter. I mean, we're talking about some fairly extreme bits of history here, or at least so it would seem.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, it is kind of part of the plan, I guess, to try to bring about, you know, empathy for this character. Certainly, because you know, if part of the story is, you know, not fully explained, I find that people can at least hopefully kind of insert themselves into that story more easily. Whereas if it was, you know, explicitly drawn out and explicitly stated that this is the way it is and this is exactly what happened, I think it would be potentially a little bit more difficult for people to put themselves inside that story and to really start to kind of experience the emotions of the character in the way that I hope they would. So that's definitely something that I was thinking about in terms of empathizing with Donna.
Sure,
yeah.
Sure. Is it just on a little aside here, and maybe it's connected, but I'm not convinced of this, but I think the first dialogue in the film is actually dogs barking. Is that?
Yes. Yeah. The first creature that makes a sound is a dog. Yes.
Okay, good. I wasn't sure. So that leads me to then some of the stylistic decisions that you make clearly are so intentional and just seem to just so suit the space that Donna is existing in. And so I was fascinated by your framing of her when she was on her own, when she was with animals, but even and maybe even more importantly, when she ever seemed to be with any of the professionals in the film.
Yeah.
You know, they were never in the screen. They were always, or most often, they were angry with her. It seemed,
yes,
these people in authority who didn't quite get her. And
exactly.
Yeah, so I'd love to hear a bit more, just even from a filmmaker's perspective. About that going in. Was that storyboarded? Was that stuff that sort of came out as you sort of said, you know what, I've got some ideas around how I'm going to create a lonely space for Donna to live in visually?
It was definitely something that we did plan for, although we did also kind of discover a rhythm as we were filming. So
nice.
My DOP Jeff Wheaton and I did a lot of planning before we started shooting, and made some kind of initial choices. In particular, to shoot in 4:3 was one thing that we decided in advance, and that kind of came about from me wanting it to be a portrait film and really wanting to have a portrait of a specific person and to really focus on one specific person and her experience. So we felt like 4:3 was kind of a portrait frame.
Right.
It just it fits the human face quite well. So we decided to go, and it's also kind of a smaller frame, which is interesting as well when you're, filming a person alone. We filmed Shan, as Donna by herself a lot. So, there wasn't two people that you had to fit into a frame. You just had to fit one.
Right.
So 4:3 really lends itself to framing one person, I find. So we made that choice. And then in terms of the kind of stillness and the loneliness that I wanted to portray, we decided to not move the camera. So that was another kind of thing that we decided in advance, was to lock off every shot, which kind of I felt like added to kind of the quietness of the film and kind of subtle observation kind of feeling that I was going for, especially when Donna was alone by herself, kind of, in a quiet apartment, no one else to talk to type of thing. And then in terms of the various people that Donna encounters, various professionals, that was something that we kind of developed as we were shooting. Jeff and I kind of felt that we wanted the focus of every scene to be Donna. We wanted her to be the focus of every interaction. And I was more interested in seeing her reaction to what other people were saying. They're the kind of doctors or counselors or, her boss at the animal shelter, their kind of experience wasn't that important to me. It was Donna's experience that was important to me. So I wanted to film her reaction and, her dialogue and everything, so that we, as the audience, would be really focused on what she was experiencing as opposed to what anyone else was kind of thinking of her. But also you can kind of tell that, these are kind of forces that are working against Donna, and not a lot of she's not making any connections in these scenes where we don't see the other person. So I felt like because she's not really connecting to these other characters, she's unable to connect to them, and they don't really understand her struggle. I felt like it worked as well to just focus on her, because it emphasizes that that we're still just with her experience, and she's not making a connection with this other character.
I felt, Heather, it's so interesting as I was listening to you just chat there and sort of unpacking some of the stylistic decisions and how you want this woman portrayed and the portrait and the focus on her. And I just feel like, as I'm reflecting back on it, I'd have to see it again, but I just feel like there's just one big, fat, massive misunderstanding here. People, like you said, people don't, they just don't get Donna. They're not listening. Like her reactions to the professionals, to them, ultimately making the decision they do about the animals, and it really adds that contrast, because she's so sort of understated and measured. I think I used the word measured earlier, but she just doesn't seem to react. This is not what you would call a typical, I suppose, alcoholic, or someone who, as you said earlier, or someone who suffers from maybe mental health issues, or who is really alone and so on. You would almost expect more extreme reactions, right? So I'm just really now struck even by her sense of normalcy, and wonder and almost wonder how much out of whack everyone else is around her. Does that make sense?
No, totally.
Yeah, and so of course animals get her, and she gets animals. That makes perfect sense, right? That's a beautiful part of the story as well. And we barely even touched on the animals, but yeah, no, that's just. I mean, thanks for letting me sort of tease out that revelation as I'm chatting with you. But yeah, how many people have not listened to Donna for the last 35 or 40 years?
Yeah, and I think she's kind of almost resigned to that, and to not being heard and to not being taken seriously. And I think that is revealed in those interactions she has with various professionals, because she's almost just along for the ride. I feel like at this point in her life, she's not used to having the feeling of being in control. She's not used to the feeling of, taking charge of her life or really having a say in what happens to her. And so when faced with these kind of, professionals making decisions about her life, she kind of just goes along with it, because that's what, she's become accustomed to, I think, over the years.
When near the end of the film, when the animals are, being taken away out of the small mini zoo that has developed at Donna's house, and I've actually visited people that are not too far off of where Donna is at over the years. I couldn't help but be struck by the deep irony, and you must have smiled about this as a writer and the director when the line was delivered about, animals are something to the effect of animals are our well-being. Their priority has to come first. It was just such a beautifully ironic and actually, frankly, pretty tragic moment. That lack of self-awareness, right?
Yes, exactly.
And yet
that was a huge part. Yeah, the lack of self-awareness was a huge part of Donna's character and other characters as well. But that was actually interesting that you kind of articulated that, because lack of self-awareness is definitely something that I've been talking about in terms of this character from like the very beginning, from when I first started writing the script. That was one of the main kind of traits that I would keep coming back to when I was writing this character was a lack of self-awareness. So that's really cool that you picked up on that.
Cool. Yeah, no, that's interesting. And it struck me too. Just as I'll reflect more on it after our conversation. I love doing interviews about with people I haven't met before about these creative pieces, because they sort of come alive in the conversation. And often what happens for me is I have this idea of where this conversation might go, and it sort of goes there, but maybe opens up new doors. And then of course after you've hit the record button and you've stopped it, and you're driving home or you're walking away, oh wow, I so wish we had talked about this as well.
Exactly.
But anyway, isn't that the beauty of conversation and what makes it so interesting? But reflecting back on this misunderstanding and the lack of self-awareness on both sides of the equation here, and frankly, all of her relationships, does her daughter shutting her down in such an extreme way, is that really justified? I mean, I love the fact that you don't give us more here, because it does make me want to ask deeper questions about about what's going on here, and how and when do I behave that way with my friends and my family and so on.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. It's something that I really kind of went back and forth on how much to include, about the relationship with her daughter. Initially in the script there was more information given. Not a full a full story, but definitely more information. But as I kind of went through the edit, I started kind of scaling that back and scaling it back some more and scaling it back some more, and it just it kind of felt right to keep that as more of a mystery. And again, like I said before, I think that helps with the audience to kind of put themselves into those types of scenarios, like you said, like wondering about your own life, like, what would it take for me to cut off my, a parent or something like that. You can kind of contemplate these questions for yourself, how far would a parent have to go in order to completely, for their child to completely decide to cut them off like that, so it kind of brings it back to the audience and lets them kind of unpack it and think more about these questions in terms of their own life, and then hopefully through doing that, then they can empathize more with the struggle of what Donna's going through. So
I love the fact, I want to come back to that in a second, because I have a couple thoughts. Again, what was it, and you don't have to tell me, but what was it that happened between mother and daughter? And probably it was an erosion of trust and relationship over a long period of time. It wasn't any one thing, I would imagine, when we all look, we all look through our own past and our own histories. But she just, again, I want to go back to that measured approach, even the way she breaks the bottle of wine because she's she doesn't freak out. She does it in such, and I went, oh, please tell me she's going to filter that through a strainer before she drinks it, and of course she did.
And of course she did. Yeah. I mean, it's not her first rodeo.
That's right. This is not a lady who's way offside, and so when you see, what was it that caused this relationship to break down, in such an extreme way, and she says something to the effect of, when she's talking to her therapist, I enjoy my glass of wine because my glass of wine,
exactly.
So
that
the contradictions
back
of it,
to the
right?
Lack of self-awareness.
Lack of self-awareness, and the
definitely.
contradictions and the paradoxes that we all live with, and I think you just so beautifully kind of point them out as existential sore thumbs, if you know what I mean.
Exactly.
So I want to ask you about something about her, and just because I'm so sort of fascinated by who she is and where she's ultimately going to wind up. But for me, she's got a real meaning and a purpose that she's now found. She has clearly a generous spirit. She has so much
Yes.
to give.
Yes, exactly.
And
Yeah.
she's got this ability to love, and to love certainly other animals. Seems to want to repair things with her daughter, and yet winds up there in the first place. Like, it's again, we're back to that whole contradiction. How, what can we learn from that? How does that even happen in the first place? It's and I think this is what's so sort of tragically beautiful about, I guess, just living life, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's well put. Yeah, I mean, I tend to be drawn to stories of kind of the cycles of behavior, or behaviors that can kind of manifest themselves in a cyclical way in our lives. So yeah, I think with Donna, she kind of ends up at the end, where she was at the beginning,
right?
to a certain extent. So yeah, I'm kind of fascinated by this ability for people to, repeat the same mistakes kind of in different forms, or again, with the lack of self-awareness, to kind of not necessarily learn from mistakes, but to replay them over and over again throughout your life, in various different ways. And yeah, I think that's part of developing Donna's character was her kind of repeating mistakes that she's made in the past again. So yeah.
Sadly, we're going to have to wrap it up in a couple of minutes. Believe it or not, we're coming to the end of this episode, at least, of Face to Face. Maybe I'm hoping that we're going to have another conversation down the road, because
definitely.
But I think she's talking. I'm not sure who she was talking to, but it was one of those professionals who's off camera. But Charlie loves me no matter what I do. And
yes, that's kind of an important moment for the film.
Well, it really is, and of course, anyone who's had an animal kind of understands that for sure. But isn't really that what Donna's? Isn't that really what we're all looking for?
Well, exactly.
Right?
Yeah, that's it's kind of the universal, message in the film that I feel like, everyone can connect to, even though Donna goes about it in unconventional ways. What she's really just looking for is love and connection with another living thing. And I think, I hope that's what makes the film accessible and allows an audience to really empathize and connect with her, because, I feel like everyone can understand that, and everyone can understand, the desire to have a connection. And yeah, that's definitely an important moment in the film. She's basically articulating, her own struggle, really, in that scene. And revealing to us, what she desires, and that, that is kind of this unconditional love and acceptance, and that's what she's getting from her pets. So, that's part of what drives her to continue to kind of acquire more to satisfy that need. But yeah, that's definitely a part of the film that I hope can help people kind of connect with her and see that, yeah, even though she's doing things that people would probably consider to be somewhat extreme, that really her actual desire is something that's quite universal, and that everybody can understand.
Yeah, to be loved with no judgment, no guilt, no shame. And
exactly.
It's kind of hard for us to do, it seems to me. Animals do it well. Us human beings have a tough time with it. Can I say, as we sort of come to the end here, I so love so many different shots in the film, and the way you articulate the story and just lay it out. I mean, it sure looks like it was beautifully storyboarded. But one particular shot, the shot of, I think, if I remember correctly, help me out here. It's a shot of Donna vaping in a cloud of smoke through the hamster cage. There's a few like that in the film for sure that really stand out, but that one in particular, I just brought a smile to my face, that's for sure. Hey, that
was nice.
so just tell me real quick, what are you expecting? What are you expecting at the Q&As? Do you have any sense of what it's going to be like as you step into TIFF?
Yeah. Well, you never know.
True.
It's always an interesting experience doing Q&As. You never know what the audience is going to be thinking or what they want to ask. I'm sure I'll get some questions about the animals. People are always interested in what it's like working with, not just one animal, but many many animals in one production. So I'll probably get some questions about that. But other than that, it's hard to say where it will go. Hopefully, Shan will be with me in Toronto for our first screening. And she's going to come up to do the Q&A with me. So hopefully the audience will have some good questions for her. So I'm sure she'll have some really interesting answers that I'd like to hear.
Oh, I bet.
So, definitely hoping for that. But it's always kind of nerve-wracking but exciting time doing the Q&As because who knows what the audience will come up with.
Well, and I think that's kind of, for me, that's almost a theme in the film. There's so many things that we could keep talking about that your film touches on, and I think, frankly, it's a sign of a brilliant story and a beautiful story, and what a compelling and engaging and marvelous film. I really loved it, and congratulations again. And sadly, we're wrapping it up. We've been talking with Heather Young today about her new film, Murmur, the world premiere of a bold new Canadian filmmaker. Can I say that? Am I allowed to say that, Heather?
You sure can.
Thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much.